And we are recording. What's up, guys? I'm here with my good friend Jake. How you doing, Jake?
I'm doing great, dude. How are you?
Doing fantastic. All right, so today we're going to be talking about Curse of the Mistwraith, and we're going to go full spoilers and examine some of the themes, some of the scenes, some of the character arcs, and just have a discussion. All right, man. So I was thinking first we could talk about the prologue. Just start off right at the beginning of the story because this is the first and only time we get that framing narrative. And from where we're at in the story, I feel like that framing narrative has permeated the books. Like we go into it with this knowledge, but it's not addressed. Like they don't do the Patrick Rothfuss thing where it's like in each book you get the framing narrative again, and you're being told that the story is being told. Like in the first book, we're told that the wizards are going back, and we're getting an account of events. And we know that the Lord of Light and his church or whatever has remembered these events a certain way, and we're getting these wizards going back and examining what actually happened. And I have the prologue here. And one thing I thought was really interesting is they refer to Lysaer as the Lord of Light, but they name Arithon. They never actually name Lysaer in this prologue. And AP Canavan actually said something very interesting about it. Even though it's trying to be objective with looking at the events of the war between Lysaer and Arithon, it's saying like, oh, this is what's generally understood to be the history. This is what Lysaer's church has remembered as the history of these events. But let's go back and give an objective look. And AP kind of read between the layers, and he's like, these people going back and having this look at things probably have a slight bias towards Arithon, towards wanting to get his account, even though that they're presenting to the reader like this is an objective account.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think this is an awesome place to start too, because it, like you said, it permeates the whole thing. And I totally agree with that. It's like just the fact that they say the name Arithon, it feels more familiar.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe they're just more comfortable with him, or they side with him more, or something. Who knows?
Right.
But like, you know, you go through the whole book, and that fits even more as you read the book, right? Because it's like they're all together for, you know, the vast majority of the story. There's like little parts where one of them might go off and do something or whatever, but a lot of the time, Lysaer and Arithon, and at least Sandir and Dakar are together a lot. But it always seems like they're kind of hanging out with Arithon more, the mages.
Mm-hmm.
It always just kind of feels that way. Lysaer's kind of off to the side. So yeah, I agree with you. It does seem like they're saying it's an objective account, but there seems like there's a little bit of bias there, which then us as the reader, if we try to keep that in mind, I'm sure we'll talk about this a bunch more times, either in this video or in future ones, but it's like Janny loves to do this where she's playing with your expectations. Right. And here she's setting us up to expect an objective account, but she's over there knowing like, oh, this is actually a little bit biased. And then we gotta, you know, so it's, which is one of the major themes that she does throughout this whole thing. So cool.
Yeah, I think especially what you're saying about how we get them together in a party for most of the Curse of the Mistwraith. You know, we get that kind of a party of four with the Sandir, Dakar, and then the two brothers. That just further feeds into the idea that, oh, this is going to be like Tolkien. Here's our little fellowship. You know, even the sorcerers are called the Fellowship Sorcerers. And then that sort of like Tolkien-esque, oh, these two brothers that hate each other, but they're going to come together to fight the Mistwraith, is intentionally called out about halfway through the book, which I thought was insane.
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't agree more. That caught me so off guard also, by the way.
Right.
Which goes along with the expectations. Like, it's called Curse of the Mistwraith. And I'm like, oh, okay, by the end of the book, they're going to go fight the Mistwraith. That's the quest. The whole book's going to be them learning to work together, and then at the end, they fight the thing. And that's just not what we get. And it just put me on my heels immediately.
It's so interesting too, because like in the prologue, she tells you like they've been in war for 500 years. And then I think you and I both, and probably most people that read this book, went into it being like, okay, but by the end, they're going to learn to get like come together and fight the Mistwraith. Yeah. Knowing full well, we just read a prologue that like was the complete antithesis to that, like completely contradicted. So again, like she challenges your assumptions a lot in this book, but also there are so many times where she comes out and tells you even though you as the reader are supposed to miss it. Like it'll say
Mhm.
things clearly, and it's so easy to move over them because so many of these sentences are packed with so much meaning that you're never going to glean it all. So I feel like I'm constantly going over details, and me and Jake were actually talking before this video. I went back and looked. Interestingly enough, we get the flashback into Lysaer and how his mother abandoned him, and how Lysaer's father was threatening her to use another child as a war with the pirates of Koriathain. One line that I was telling Jake about that I completely glossed over the first time is that Lysaer's father had a wife prior to his mother that was lost in the war. And, Lysaer's father can be kind of seen as like the mustache twirling bad guy, at least for the Destiny Lure section. But even he, through one little line here that most readers will, gloss right over and won't think about again, we're shown like why he is this way.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you brought that up. I told you this too. Like I'm so glad that you saw that, because it adds an extra layer, and it shows even more about, like, just even more pain behind the war between Koriathain and why am I blanking on
The Seleucids, whatever
what is their kingdom?
Amroth,
Yes,
the king
good.
of Amroth.
Yes, it's just another layer of like behind that conflict, and then obviously when Lysaer's mom leaves, has an affair with the leader of Koriathain, and then their child is Arithon. So then, like, there's that direct, like, feeling of betrayal, but she only
Yep.
left because she felt so, like, in danger, like you said. Like, there's so many little nuances to it, and I agree with what you said there. Like, sometimes Janny will have these sentences that they do matter. It's not that they don't matter, but they're just kind of slipped in. Wait,
Yeah.
how am I verbalizing what I'm trying to say? Like, every sentence matters, but she chooses to focus on certain things more than other things.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, there's some things that she'll kind of state and then move past, and
And they hold
then
more weight than you initially thought.
yes, which makes the series like we talked about as I pull my headphones out, just ripe for a reread, right? And we'll be able to see all those things and notice the breadcrumbs that were there all along, right? It's
Yep. That
exciting.
real evergreen quality that I could see myself having like a third read through and still catching stuff, because
Yeah,
I doubt I'll be able to get it all on like the second read. But
yeah, I agree.
in preparation for this video, there were a few scenes, even just within, the Destiny Lure section, which I think a lot of readers, they read past that because they've been promised this world of Aethera. So not everybody focuses in on Destiny Lure, because that's not the world we're sitting in for most of the story. But, we got Lysaer's abandonment with his mother, which I think is partially what caused this whole conflict, is because he looks at Arithon and he sees, like, you have his mother who loved Arithon, a father who loved Arithon, the maternal grandfather who trained Arithon to be a master of sorcery, and you have all these people in his camp. And whenever Lysaer brings Arithon to his father, to the king of Amroth, he doesn't get a congratulations. The king of Amroth speaks to him like he's nothing. And I think that could be because the king of Amroth, lost his daughter and lost his wife, and he doesn't allow himself to love anyone again. But what you see with Lysaer, I think a lot of the hatred that he has for Arithon comes from envy, because, here you have his brother, they have the same mother, but Arithon was loved by all these people, and Lysaer was deprived of that, both paternal love, maternal love, his maternal grandfather. And me as a reader, I think that is one of the primary reasons for the conflict that took center stage when they got to Aethera.
You cooked on that one, dude. I have nothing to add. That is fantastic insight. I couldn't agree more. And I didn't. I don't think I fully appreciated all. Like, I think I caught little bits of the envy stuff. At least that, like, Lysaer, especially later in the book, when you find out he feels a little bit insecure about not being able to use magic very well and things like that. And he sees Arithon and he's just like, oh, I wish I could do that. That I caught little bits of the envy stuff, but not nearly to that extent to where what you're describing. And I think you're probably spot on. That underlies so much of that that conflict between the two.
I could be
well
wrong.
done.
Janny could be like, no, that's not why they're fighting. Like, every time you think you understand this series, it takes somebody like Janny or Chibi Po to be like, you didn't get it. Or AP. AP is great. But yeah, that's my first time reading. I definitely had those vibes that there's a ton of envy there, and there's not a lot of flashbacks in Wars of Light and Shadow. It's mainly just the story from beginning to end. So I thought flashing back to like Lysaer as a kid and seeing that conflict between his parents, I felt like there was a reason for that, mainly because the story is so linear. So it's like whenever there are times where she indulges and goes back in time, I feel like that's especially something to take note of. Another one in Das and Elur is during Arithon's like drug-fueled haze, he remembers his grandfather asking him, like, are you sure you want to be the heir to Cephalin? Are you sure, you want to do this? And, even though he is introduced to the reader, we get, an accounting of different Amroth sailors as they pull him into the water, and everyone thinks he's like this demon, this monster. When we get his little flashback into what he was thinking, he only became the heir to Cephalin because he wanted to end the conflict. Not to end it as in like destroying the enemy, but to bring about peace. He wanted to restore the crops that had been destroyed. There was no. The group of pirates, they had to resort to piracy because they didn't have enough crops to feed their people, and that's an immediate deviation from how Arithon was portrayed to us initially from those other perspectives.
Yeah, totally. And it's hitting that same like the duality of the character and Janny playing with the expectations that we have. Like they think like you said, they think he's like a demon. He's this horrible thing. Why did they think that? Well, I'm like, what kind of crazy shadow magic was he using in this naval battle before everything ended, right? I would love to see Janny. I would love to see that battle sometime. That'd be really fun. A little prequel short story or something. But he seems awful in that way. But at the end of the day, he's trying to protect his people. He's trying to, like you said, end the conflict. He wants peace, but he's the one with the power and the type of power that's horrifying, that scares people, that like he could wipe everything out. And I think we see as I was looking back through some of my notes and as we talked through some of this too, I think there's a lot of really great foreshadowing in the beginning here that we end up seeing later. Like again, not to spoil the end of the book yet before we get there, that we see him not really wanting to fight, but he has to protect people he cares about. And when he wants to fight, like that boy can fight, So I love all the setup that was early on and just seeing those themes already so clearly. And as you're so well pointing out, just how it really very strongly lays the groundwork for their interpersonal conflict the whole way through.
Touching up on what you said about how Arithon is kind of averse to violence. He like that's a last resort for him. We talked about this briefly on our spoiler-free thing, but on the cover, I think it's amazing how Lysaer, his hands hovering over the sword, Arithon is cradling his instrument, and then now that I'm thinking about it, not to jump everywhere, be all over the place, but when Arithon gets the choice of choosing the weapon, he chooses the Lyranth. When he gets a choice from, isn't he offered to choose a weapon and he chooses the instrument instead?
That sounds right. That's when they're with that first, was that bard's name? Felirin, something like that.
And then he picked out I know for sure he picked out like the less gaudy Lyranth because he wanted he was able to see, which one was more, but like Lysaer is so quick to violence. It's his first resort, and it's always Arithon's like last thing. And my sister actually just started Curse of the Mistwraith, and she said something about that initial naval battle. She was like, it was my understanding that the Amroth sailors like destroyed their own ships because of some sorcery that Arithon pulled. And that's what she got from it. I'd be interested in going back and looking at that to see, because as you know, later in the book and in go on more in the series, like Arithon's shadows, he does kind of play into making his enemies kind of destroy their own forces or become their own biggest antagonists. Like,
Yeah.
he, even whenever he does do battle, it's very rare that he is just, meeting might with might. He's usually in some way diverting his antagonist to, kind of savage themselves in a way.
That's that's really got me thinking. I want to go back and read that again
Yeah,
now.
same here. I was like so focused on getting like other scenes, I never went back and looked at that one. But as we're talking, I'm like, I wonder, because if so, that definitely hinted at some stuff in book 2.
That wouldn't surprise me if that's the case.
Yeah. As we get to later on in the book, where they get out of Das and Elur, how did you feel about the section where we transition from Das and Elur and they go through the world gate? How did you feel about that whole section? Any thoughts?
I thought it was, well, first of all, I thought it was really interesting because, again, I was expecting them to go right to Aethera, and they just didn't. There was a different step. So again, she got me, but we saw, it was like a really condensed version of what I was expecting the whole book to be, and in a sense, sort of is in a way. Like they're put in this position, and they don't like each other, and they're like literally fighting, but also arguing, and then they sort of begrudgingly realize they need each other to survive. They're in like a desert world here, somewhere between Das and Elur and Aethera. And did we ever get a name for that world? I don't remember. But anyway, so like we get them kind of going through their journey, right? And then they go, and I think they wind up fighting these weird wraith things that maybe that means more. Maybe it was just some foreshadowing for what's to come with the actual Mistwraith. But the other really interesting, cool thing that immediately made me think back to the prologue is they find this well and they drink out of it, and they're like, "Oh, I feel weird. I'm going to live for 500 years, right?" I can't remember how they found out that they got granted long life, but they at least could sense the magic in it,
right?
And we learn that this is how the conflict goes on for 500 years, as we're told in the prologue. So I love that. It just felt like it was a microcosm for what I was expecting the whole book to be, and it already circled back to the prologue, and it kind of gave me hints at all the stuff I was expecting. And then I was like, well, man, where do we go from here? Mm-hmm. And then we step through that next gate at that point. So I guess I didn't get a ton of like, I don't know, deep theme stuff or anything like that, unless I'm missing something obvious. But I just loved the well, I won't repeat myself again, just all the stuff I just talked through. I just liked how we saw all that kind of play out.
Yeah. I think everything she set up on Das and Elur and in that little splinter world, or I guess Das and Elur is the splinter world, the world between Das and Elur and Aethera, I thought that was really well done. I mean, we get them getting their sort of like quasi immortality, their little long-lived boon. I think, like you were saying, it you kind of get what you were expecting from the book, where you see these two brothers come together and they sort of begrudgingly start to work together. And I think that just serves the story later on, whenever you do get the conflict emerging between them, whenever it does come to that head, and they do, the conflict reaches the point where there's no going back, and they're more antagonistic against one another. I think that time, them trying to survive in that desert, and them meeting Asandir and Dakar and going on this quest, I think all those scenes helped contribute to the loss we feel. Like, oh, there could have been some fraternal love here. There could have been something. It wasn't nothing. Like there was enough there to where a relationship could have sprouted if things had gone differently.
100%. Yeah, well said. That's which just makes that split that happens feel even worse, because it's like, oh man, they really could have. They were getting along, right? This could have been really cool. It all fell apart, and I'm not so sure it's just their fault. I think there's a little bit of meddling in there as well.
Yeah. Something you touched up on before we started recording was the way Janny plays with our expectations with this Fellowship of Seven. You put it in really good word. Like you summed it up really well when you mentioned that, the Koriani are kind of portrayed to the reader as like, oh, they're they're the bad guys, but if you actually look at them, they're mostly observing, whereas the Fellowship is doing a lot of the meddling. And do you want to expound on that? Because these are your thoughts. I'm just regurgitating them.
Yeah, this is certainly one of the things I am most excited to get more information about through the rest of the series.
Mm-hmm.
Is it feels like we are very much positioned to think that the Fellowship is good and the Koriani are bad, and which I think is natural the way the story is told, right? Like we spend a lot of time with the Fellowship, and we see, Dakar is funny, and Asandir kind of has these little jokes that he, whatever, he makes fun of Dakar sometimes, but it's not in a really mean way. It's at least, kind of funny. Anyway, and it just seems like he feels like the Gandalf, right?
Right.
And we're going, and even in the prologue, like it's from the mage's perspective, and they mention Arithon, and it feels like Arithon is sort of our hero. And I'm just like, okay, it feels like they're the good guys. But then I can't help but notice he like blocks Arithon's memories to manipulate him into doing what he wants. He gives him the ability to sense the Paravian energy to manipulate him into doing what he wants. They finally get there to fight the Mistwraith, and they realize through the fight that like we have to let it touch one of these guys. Let's make it touch Lysaer, because he's not strong in magic, so he's less of a risk if he gets possessed. So they knew that was a risk, but they let it happen anyway. And I'm like, man, there's so many things that they're really doing this stuff. And it also makes me wonder, their goals are they want these two to defeat the Mistwraith because that will help them restore their number to 7 again. And it will help them bring the Paravians back into the world. And I'm just like, are those good things? They sound like great things. Like the Fellowship seems like the good guys. The Paravians seem like this mythical race of beings that they're so pure and magical, and of course we would want them. They're gone. Of course we would like them back. But do we? I don't know, right? I don't know. I'm questioning it. And the Koriani they're just watching, and they send Alira out to go do some stuff, and she doesn't seem to be really, the only way she really seems to be meddling is like she likes Arithon. I'm like, okay, that doesn't seem like that big a deal. She kind of gets in trouble for it, but not that bad. And so I don't know. Like this is one of the central things that I'm so keyed in on as we get to read further into the books, is like I know it's not as simple as one is the good guy and one's the bad guy. Like I don't think it's just as simple as like, oh, the Fellowship was evil all along and the Koriani were great. I don't think it's that simple. But they got to both be in the gray area somewhere, and I don't know. I'm waiting for Janny to just completely flip everything on its head at some point.
I think it's interesting because we do have some idea of where the end goal is for the Fellowship. We don't really have that for the Koriani, at least. I mean, there's a good chance that it got spelled out in one line, and yourself and and me, we just went right over it. But for the Fellowship, we know for sure that their priorities are. I mean, not for sure, but I know with some clarity that 2 of their main goals are restoring themselves to 7 and restoring the Paravians. I think you're right. Like he is Asandir, especially, the Kingmaker. He's kind of presented as this Gandalf, this Merlin type character, and like Gandalf, Merlin, like their priorities are the realm of men and the betterment of mankind. And the Fellowship, a lot of their actions, they seem almost to like their goal is so complete in wanting to restore the Paravians that they will try to accomplish that goal at the cost of the good of humanity. And that could be for the individual, like Arithon, wanting to pursue music and them forcing him down this path to become a king. There's a line in the conflict between the Mistwraith and, our characters where it said Lysaer was thrown like a sorcerer's puppet or something. It's spelled out on the page that he is, used as a puppet or used as a shield. So it could mean individuals. And then later on in the series, I don't want to get into that, but they almost stop. They halt human advancement for the sake of Paravians. Even though, in this first arc, we don't really get the return of the Paravians yet. It seems like they're trying to keep this world conducive to the return of the Paravians, even at the cost of human advancement and human betterment.
Yeah, totally. And I'm also like, I wonder if the Paravians will come back, right? Maybe they don't.
Right.
Who knows? But I can't wait to see how that all plays out. And you and I talked about this a little bit. That I know you've read the short stories, and I finished the three that you can read after Curse of the Mistwraith. I finished those today, and those add little extra layers. I don't want to spoil those, but they add some extra layers behind. How do I describe this? Sort of the political situation between Paravians and men, sort of around the time that the Mistwraith is appearing. And we learn in this book that the Mistwraith appearing is what sort of banished the Paravians from the world. I also, maybe you're clear on this. I'm unclear if they're dead or if they're just somewhere else. I don't really know.
The Paravians?
Yeah.
I don't think they're dead.
Okay.
That's not me picking
up
onto anything. That's just, I just don't think they're dead.
Yeah. Well, we know they're not all dead because we get a glimpse at one in this book, right? That I know we're going to talk about. But yeah, those short stories add a little bit more flavor if anyone's interested in reading those. They're great, by the way, and they're on the Paravia.com website. So go buy them.
Yeah, I think they're all like $1.50 or like $3 or something. It's nothing for the amount of lore insight you get from it. It is well worth it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say just really quick. There was a couple lines in there that made me like give it like the quick side eye. Like, what is that? Right? Like that changes how I feel about something. And so yeah, it's not going to change the overarching story, but it does give you some little fun glimpses into things. So
you saying that makes me kind of want to reread them, but I'm saving a lot of my reread energy for as I get further into the series, because it's like I had a conversation with Janny about this because, you know, she's working on The Guardian, which is the sequel to The Gallant, more of Varaine's story. And I was like, where should I be at? What sort of world context do I need to jump into The Guardian? And she was like, you could jump in right after The Gallant, having never read Curse of the Mistwraith. But the way my books work is each installment in the world you get will bring new context to everything. Even though I read those books right after Curse of the Mistwraith, I wonder how differently I would feel after finishing Warhost. But the only thing that's stopping me from rereading The Decoy, rereading Reigns of Destiny and Child of Prophecy is like, well, what kind of, you know, after Song of the Mysteries, I'll have even more context. So when will the rereads end? So I'm kind of holding off on that. And I do plan on rereading The Gallant and Curse post Song of the Mysteries for sure. But
yeah, something tells me I'm going to want to just start over the series once we're done. Something tells me that desires. I don't know if that can happen or not for time, but we'll see.
I really want you to revisit The Gallant because I've been kind of revisiting it myself, and you do get a little bit more insight into what life was like before the banishment, the whatever happened to the Paravians, we don't know. So you get a little bit of more context of what life was like on Athera with the Paravians still present, and it's crazy, man. It's some weird fantasy stuff. Like you've seen unicorns, but not like this.
Yeah, there's
speaking of unicorns, we both actually, you just mentioned this passage, but we get a little brief mention of unicorns. On a faraway isle amid waters never charted, a unicorn stands sentinel as Deshthir's mists part, yet she does not dance for joy as tree-filtered sunshine glances across a cave mouth, and a weakened shimmer of wardlight fades back to quiescence without roughing the sorcerer sealed under sleep spells within. So much to unpack there.
Dude.
So much to unpack there. And we may not even have the context to unpack it currently.
Maybe not. It's one sentence too. Crazy.
And the way they just threw in the sleeping sorcerer like that was nothing. Like
where do we even start with this? I like the sorcerer makes me like is that what is his name? Silidus, the Lost?
Right.
Is that him? Is he gone? Like how did he wind up where the Paravians are? Or is this just like is this where all the Paravians are? Is it just one lone unicorn? Like, I don't know. There's so many unknowns.
One thing you said that, you know, when I went back and reread it, you know, like a third time, because we actually, like, you sent me the audio message saying there's this scene with the unicorn. And it was like right as I was sending you an audio message, having not listened to that one. So we both mentioned that scene with the unicorn. But you mentioned that the unicorn, the Koriathain Paravian, almost seems... The Fellowship want the Mistwraith gone so they can get the Paravians back. This Paravian is looking at Deshthir's, the conquest of Deshthir, and it's not viewing it in a positive light.
Yeah.
It seems like it's kind of like, oh no, like the Mistwraith is being, which brings into question like what is going on with this Mistwraith and with these ancient races.
Yeah. I mean, and maybe we're reading too much into it, or maybe at least I don't want to put words in your mouth. Maybe I'm reading too much into it.
No. I think you're onto some stuff for sure.
Okay.
But, sorry, what were you saying?
We'll see. Because part of me is just like, well, maybe it's just like taken aback because it didn't expect the Mistwraith to be vanquished. So it's just like, oh, like what? So maybe it's just that astonishment, maybe. But then I'm like, I don't know. It feels like it's like why,
Yeah.
And which then makes me question even exactly. It makes me question even more. Is the Fellowship really the good guys? Or is bringing the Paravians back really a good thing? Is that really what they want? And I don't know. Maybe the sleeping mage, they have him like ransom or something, right? Like who knows? Did they put him under the sleep spell? Are they protecting him? Are they imprisoning him?
Here's one thing. Okay, I may be reading too much into this, or I may be misremembering. But during the conflict with Deshthir, or with the Mistwraith, it said multiple time wraiths, like plural. Like, I kind of got the idea that the Mistwraith is not just one entity, but is an amalgamation of entities.
Mm-hmm. I think so.
So I'm very intrigued. And then we keep getting that glimpse of the flask that is sealing the Mistwraith. So, I mean, that's building up to something. Something, 100%. Again, we don't have the context to understand, but...
Yeah, because they, when they initially beat it, they trap it in that flask thing, right?
Right.
And then even after that, they were like, hey, we need a more secure prison. So they went over to, was it Rockfell? In the mountains, and they tried to imprison it there. And if I'm not mistaken, it's like one of the very last lines of the book where it was like the Mistwraith is stirring or something. It's just like it's trying to escape, it seems, right? So it's like this isn't over. And thinking about like how Janny approached the structure in this book, where it's like we have basically you have the whole book in a little section, and then you get it played out over a longer time scale through the rest of the story. I can't help but wonder, does book 1 do that for the entire 11-book series? Mm-hmm. Is the Mistwraith going to come back, and it winds up, it is in fact the big bad, and we have to fight it all the way through this entire thing? I don't know, but I wouldn't be shocked.
I think that that would be crazy to like, I turn your assumptions on their head, and then when you think you have a grounding in what this story's about, boom, Mistwraith returns.
Yeah.
That would be super dope. There was before we go on to the one scene that you were telling me about, I want to briefly mention the meeting between I only knew to go back and look at this because Janny mentioned it in a conversation, is that when you first see a Sandir come into contact with Arithon, he looks at Arithon and says that he was looking into the eyes of a near equal, somebody beyond mortal powers, or near immortal power. That was our first hint that like Arithon may be on a higher level than we as the readers had thought up to that point. Mm-hmm. So I mean, that was something I went back and looked at because she mentioned it in conversation. She's like, it's all spelled out on the page, and I went back and I'm like, yeah, there was some lines in here building up to some of the stuff we get with Arithon, but I still don't think we've seen like the peak of his powers. Right. And I mean, that's just something we're going to see more of going into arc 3 and 4. Yeah,
I can't wait. And it feels like the progression through this book, and then also in, I mean, obviously you and I both have read a couple more books, but like the progression of how strong people are feels very natural and organic. And it's like, it's not, you don't open book 2 and all of a sudden somebody, now they can go Super Saiyan or whatever. They just, it's slow organic build. So it makes me wonder, like, well, how long does it take for Arithon to get to that sort of eye-to-eye level with a Sandir? And man, I'm so glad that you look back on that section also, because it's just another one of those. It's just like the thing with Lysaer's mom, right? Like it's just this little thing that slipped in.
Yeah,
but it matters, you know.
Yeah, and it's not like worded in an obscure way. Like it's like, yeah, Arithon's like as strong as a sand deer anyway.
Yeah.
And then you're like, wait. But you as the reader are interested in what happens next, so you don't stop to look at these lines.
Yeah.
But the scene I want to hear about from you is, and we talked about this over messages, was that scene as Arithon's about to be crowned, and the way that Lysaer's expectations with Arithon play out, and the way that we kind of get a glimpse into Arithon. So I wanted you to speak on that scene a little bit because I really enjoyed your thoughts on it.
Cool. Yeah, it was one of my favorite parts actually. It was which is kind of funny that it became one of my favorite parts. It just felt like it showed so much about who they are. Like, so they go to, it's in Itara, I think, right?
Yep.
Where they're like, okay, here, this is where Arithon is going to be crowned, and he doesn't want to do it, but he does it because that's what he's told he's got to do, and it's for the greater good of the world, and so he's doing his best, but he just hates it. And he feels like he's kind of wasting it. Like he's not a trained diplomat, right? Like that's not his strength. And so it seems like he kind of feels like his time could be better spent elsewhere, and he just cares about the people. And so he like ditches this meeting or whatever and goes out and he's playing with the kids, like these homeless kids out in the street. And, he's doing whatever. We'll circle back to that in a second. But, Lysaer, like, he sees this and he's just like, what are you doing? Like, what a horrible, how dare you shirk your responsibilities? Like, this is a horrible way to be a leader, which to him, of course, makes sense because that's how he is trained. He knows how to do that. And he's not as, immediately empathetic to the common person, or especially like the lowly person in the city. Mm-hmm. And so like, I think that played a big part in how he views Arithon as a leader. And we see that even more in the next few chapters where after Dakar has his next prophecy about if the two come into contact, it will lead to bloodshed. And so Arithon's trying to avoid this war. So he's leaving, but Lysaer's just like, where are you going, dude? This is what so he thinks he's horrible and a coward. So it just, again, this really natural, organic build into their conflict, just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But I think the other cool little piece of foreshadowing that I'll just call it foreshadowing and leave it there. That Arithon is out playing with these kids, and he shows that he can use his magic, not just in a scary and destructive way, or at least in like we talked about earlier, that big battle at the beginning. Maybe it was big and destructive and horrible, but maybe it was like just an illusion that made it seem worse than it was or something. Whatever. He can do that, but he can also he makes this little ship that he's just like playing with the kids and he's just showing them how cool this thing is. It's a beautiful moment in that sense, but as you read in the series, you'll notice that does matter a little bit. But so just another cool storytelling foreshadowing thing. But it just, to me, that scene just showed so much about how their conflict continued to grow, where their priorities are. Lysaer really being like, we have a responsibility, we have a duty, and we have to do this. And Arithon's just like, these people are suffering. Like, I want to go help them feel better. And it's Janie said this too. I can't remember where she said this, but it was that maybe I want to say it was the last live stream she did with Nikhil on Shelf Esteem, maybe, where Arithon makes decisions based on what's in front of him, and just like these almost kind of short-term decisions in a sense, because like he's so empathetic, he just wants to help. Whereas Lysaer really zooms out, and it's like greater good, big picture, what's best for the kingdom, and that's not necessarily bad, but it does lead to different decisions. Right. And it's just I could ramble about this forever, but I just love how their characters and their decision making and their motivations are so consistent, and they're so different from each other, and it leads to a lot of conflict that's understandable on both sides. I know everybody hates Lysaer. I get it. I will be the guy who says I don't agree with what Lysaer does, but I totally get from his perspective how he gets there. If you kind of put yourself in his world, like those decisions all make sense. So yeah, I like that scene a lot. And then we also saw Alera was there, and she kind of saw some things, and another, like, she wasn't meddling, she was just watching and trying to get a feel for their characters.
No, you bring up a lot of good points, dude, and it challenges how I interact with the text, because I think in a failing on my own part, I am so empathetic towards Arithon's character that, honestly, the shadow ship scene was the moment that I fell in love with the series. I've told this to Janny, like that was the moment where I was like, yeah, I just fell in love with Arithon and the series as a whole. But I think in one way that I failed as a reader, I don't want to sound so dramatic, I failed as a reader, but in one way that I hear you talk about it and I wish I'd paid more attention to that. I had such an aversion to how Lysaer viewed Arithon and the way he viewed a lot of these situations. And I think the way you put that is really, really apt. Like, it's not like these, anybody here wants the worst for these people. They both want what's best for the people of Eterra. They just have varying priorities, like almost contradictory priorities in how to make this place, how to positively impact these people. But I think I was just so thrown off by Lysaer's perception of his brother that I wasn't as receptive of why he has this aversion towards Arithon. And as I touched on before, I think part of it is envy because of their mother, but I think it's also just different values, because he has been raised up to be this, paragon of lawful good, to, do what's right for his people at, like he's been, raised as a member of the court. So for him, all the minutia of the legality and of governance to him, that's the number one thing that's going to make the kingdom better. And then you have the antithesis of that. You have Arithon, who doesn't want to meddle with that. And one thing I think was great about that scene, this I may not be accurate with, but I think Arithon has, this, I think he's very fond of children. Like, I think he, I think he wants to be a father, because we get that loss, like multiple times throughout, he says, I'll never have children of my own, because he doesn't want to pass on, the Cephalan duties. But you see him form all these bonds with children, form this like almost surrogate older brother / father type bond with so many kids throughout the series. And I think the relationships he forms with young children is because he will not allow himself to be a father, because he knows what he has inherited from his father. A lot of these responsibilities that he never asked for, that he never wanted, were thrust upon him by the nature of his birth. So he won't allow himself to have this child. We get that multiple times throughout the book, but he will be a father or be a mentor figure or a friend to these children that maybe don't have somebody going to bat for them. And, there's characters and ships. There's one of, is it Jarrett? Jarrett's a child in the first book, and you see a sort of relationship forming there. And I always make note of Arithon when the bonds he forms with young children and the way he views fatherhood. And I think that this scene was the first to kind of hint at that. So that's another aspect of that scene that I really like is, you get to see, like, Arithon, yes, you see him empathize with even his enemies, like in book 2, we get him empathizing with Talith and with tons of different people that are, antagonistic towards him. But I think he feels even more empathy for the young and for the vulnerable. And maybe that's partially because he himself wanted to be a father, because I don't think he would think and comment on not having children as much if there wasn't the desire there. He wouldn't make note of, oh, I can't be a father because I can't pass on, the Cephalan duties. I never want them to go through that. I never want them to go through what I went through. You wouldn't be having those thoughts if you didn't have a desire to become a father, to pass on something. But he maybe doesn't think what he has to pass on should be passed on. And so there's pain there.
Totally. That's huge. I love that you brought that up. I didn't really think about that in that way, but I think you're spot on. Because I noticed I was looking back through my notes again the other day, and I had highlighted before that he and whatever the kids, I think I said Jarrett when I was reading it, but Jarrett, however we say it, whatever it is, that like by the end he looked at him like a little brother. And it was like I highlighted that. I was like, okay, this I think I even said that in our big discussion on the Talking Story thing, that I was like, this kid's going to be important. I feel like moving forward in the series. I don't even know what else to say. I just think that's a great point, and it's a thing that I want to watch for now as I keep reading through the series. Like, how much more does he bring that up? Does he continue to form these sorts of relationships? Does he wind up having a kid? Who knows, right? Like, maybe on purpose, on accident, who knows? But like, that would be an interesting wrinkle. And our boys had enough to deal with and suffer through. I would hate to see him deal with that just emotional journey. But we'll see, I guess. Speaking of, I feel like we should touch on the battle at the end at least a little bit, right?
Yes, 100%.
It's, to me, like, that battle is really what cemented to me the idea that, like, the perspectives are just so well done in here, that from Lysaer's perspective, Arithon is this, like, conniving, tricksy hobbit, just whatever, and but from Arithon's perspective, Lysaer is just, like, become a monster, right? And it makes perfect sense. Again, not that we agree with one or the other necessarily, but if we just put ourselves in their shoes,
right,
it's consistent and it's logical and it makes sense. And they're both just doing what they feel is right, and it leads to this just horrible battle. And and again with the kids, right? So I'm so glad you brought that up, dude. Like, he didn't want the kids to fight. The kids with the clansmen that he was sort of found himself allied with, and he wanted to keep them out of it, but they were like, no, this is what we do. We're a family. We all work together.
Right.
And so he kind of let them be the diversion to they like broke the dam and let the river flood through and just take out a bunch of Lysaer's people. But then Lysaer sees the kids and he's like, you monster, you're putting kids in harm's way. How dare you? Right. And it would just, I loved everything about that, about after the flood comes through and Lysaer's army is trying to, like, pick up their pieces and go get revenge for that. And what's the headsman, Pesquill, I think, something like that. That he's just like, let's go kill all these people. And he, like, convinces Lysaer that that's the right thing to do. And he convinces him that, like, no, all these women over here, we should perform war crimes, shall we say, to lure him out, right? We got to kill him, right? Like, this will do it. He's like, all right, I guess that makes sense. He's kind of been corrupted, and we have the corruption from the Mistwraith as well, from when he got touched in the battle, and it's, like, part of him now. And it seems like they kind of both Arithon and Lysaer, they get sort of there's like a rage or a fury that comes up when they're near each other, which I think is part of Dakar's prophecy. The closer they get, the more danger there is of a battle and stuff. Yeah, which it's just
begs the question: why does the Mistwraith want these two brothers to not align themselves? Is that something there? Like, why was the curse of Deshthir to make sure that these two brothers fought? Does it fear if these two brothers were to unite? That's just a thought I had as we were talking just now, where I'm like,
yeah, that's interesting.
Why is that the main? It's not that the curse after he touched Lysaer, that Lysaer will live a terrible life and that, all these terrible things will happen to him. It's that if he comes into contact with his brother, that all of this, a rage will take them over and they'll never be able to. I mean, that we won't be able to know. I could just be grasping onto nothing, but it does beg the question of, like, why does it the Mistwraith want them not aligned?
I'm trying to think through all this now. The Mistwraith seems, I don't know if this is true or not, but it feels like it's sentient.
Yeah, agreed. Or they are sentient.
Yeah,
it's plural.
Feels like a collective. And then, okay, so there's that. It got in the way of the Paravians being there, so maybe there's like a opposition in that sense. I'm trying to also think through some of the lore drop we got in book 2, but not spoil anything with that.
Right.
I don't know if that really explains it though, because I don't remember that really being mentioned.
Yeah.
Just mentioned some other stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe like Janny has done nothing by accident so far, so there's got to be a reason. Unless it's, unless it really is just a thematic reason. I could see that, But oh man,
I don't know.
Reason I keep reading.
my new theory, and I don't even know if I subscribe to the theory, I just know that it's one that I'll have in the back of my mind, is that for some reason, Deshthir, the Mistwraith, this presence fears the aligning of Arithon and Lysaer for some reason. That's my operating theory. I'm not going to let that theory like color my reading moving forward, because I feel like the second I start firmly attaching to a theory is the second she's going to completely, flip it on me. But anyway, to get that side tangent out of the way, touching up on what you were saying about Talcorin, super hypocritical to be like, this guy's using children in a fight. Anyway, torture these women right now. Like, I'm just, as we're talking about it, I'm like, yeah, I get where Lysaer's coming from, but like Arithon using kids from his point of view, that is kind of messed up. And then you mentioned the torturing of the women, and I'm like, wait, mad at using children in warfare when these clans have already been decimated and there's so few of them, versus now you're going to torture the women.
Yeah. But he was it wasn't his idea necessarily, right? It was the guy was like convincing him when he was he was kind of fragile with the curse and just everything that's happening. Wasn't he injured also? Did he hurt his arm or something?
I think there's something there. Some conflict prior to Arithon being crowned. I think there was some injury he took.
Maybe.
I remember he smashed Arithon's Lyranth.
Yes.
Which to me was one of the moments where I was like, okay,
yeah,
it's evil time. Evil. He's going evil.
Darth Lysaer's here.
Yeah, exactly. The torturing of the women, and I don't know. I think Lysaer has a subconscious hatred of women. I want to touch up on this. Not hatred. I feel like that's a harsh word, but I want to touch up on this when we talk about Warhost, or if we do ships and Warhost in one discussion. Anyway, when we have a spoilers discussion, I'm sure you're familiar with the way he reacts to a certain female character. Sure. And I want to know if the way he views women is a response to his mother's abandonment. Because I think it is. I in fact, that's not one where I'm like, maybe I'm reading too much into it. I'm like, I know your mother didn't love you, and now you're an incel. No, I'm kidding. But
I bet you're right, though. That's great.
Lysaer is incel. No, I'm kidding. I think I'm way harsher on Lysaer than you are. But I love that about this discussion. I love that you're able to like make me view it from his point of view. I think my biases, I just love Arithon so much, and I find Lysaer so hypocritical that I'm not always able to see his side of things, even when Janny spells it out on the page. Like, this is what he's thinking. This is why he's thinking it. And a lot of them are really good reasons. But hearing you talk about it, I'm just like, yeah, I can't really, like him shirking the duties to go play with the kids. I'm just, seeing it as like, oh, yay. Like he's hanging out with, these poor kids. And I'm like, oh, wait, Jake's got a point. Like, you agreed. I know you didn't want this, but you agreed to be a ruler. And then like day 0, it's not even day 1 yet. You're already shirking your duties. So I understand why Lysaer would have all these feelings about Arithon. It's still just hard for me to empathize with them.
I get that. Thank you for saying that. I feel like I kind of do that to a fault sometimes, that I try so hard to see through somebody's perspective that sometimes it's like I won't even really let myself root for somebody, if that makes sense. Like it almost takes some of the connection out of it in a weird way, because it's like I don't know. I'm Team Arithon, just to be clear, right? I'm very much Team Arithon, but I see, if I really put myself there, like I get it, where how Lysaer got there, and I feel like I'm glad that I can look at it that way, but I'm also just like, sometimes I just want to hate the villain, right? And I have such a hard, like, I even reading Harry Potter, I'm just like, man, like Voldemort's kind of a victim of his past, And
I love that. I love that. You literally pulled like the most like evil, and you're like, yeah, well, I mean, he had some stuff going on that no, dude, that's that's crazy. But
I've never thought of that
I
before.
I agree. And I never would have thought about Voldemort like that, but
Yeah.
what a great side tangent. Like, but you're absolutely right. And yeah, I think we're really different in that aspect, but I absolutely love that you're the person I'm talking to about this series with.
Likewise.
Because I think that lends itself to critical analysis a little bit more, to break the fourth wall and to be like, okay, us as readers, I think that mindset lends itself a lot to analyzing the text critically, because I think I'm smart enough to analyze the text critically. I think a lot of times where I have my failings is I'm like so emotional. I'm like, no, Lysaer, you suck. I hate you. Da 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 da. And then sometimes when I'm reading through his sections, I'm like, we get it. You suck. We're getting back to Arithon. And I think it's a combination of empathy and apathy. It's like you're able to, not be so invested in the characters that you're able to look at it from so many POVs, and you're able to empathize with so many people across the board. Whereas me, like I find the one, I latch onto him. I latch onto my Arithons and to my fiddlers, and I hold on to them for dear life. And any character that's even slightly opposed to them, I'm like, no, I don't want to hear your side. Screw you forever. Die. So
I love the loyalty, though. I really love it because sometimes I have a hard time with that, right? So I will echo what you said. I'm really glad that I'm talking to you about this, because we have a lot of similar thoughts about the series, but I think we also have some differences here and there, which is like then we have this conversation, and there's been multiple things in the last, how long we've been talking, an hour, whatever. That was like, oh, is that a thing? That's so interesting, right? Like we get to arrive at new places because we come at it from slightly different angles sometimes, which is, I mean, that's what it's all about. I think if we both agreed on everything perfectly, it's kind of a boring conversation. I mean, it's fun, but it's kind of capped in,
you can't just be like, and this is awesome, and this is awesome, and this is awesome. You got to have somebody be like, but have you thought about it? And then you're like, oh like, oh, okay. But yeah, I agree 100%. Do you have any more thoughts on Curse of the Mistwraith? Any things that we haven't gotten to highlight yet?
I don't know. I think we hit most of it. We saw we see Halaron get introduced here, that kind of towards the end, and we're like, okay, at first we don't know who he is. He just we just see him sort of in this, he's sort of been captured, quote unquote, although I hazard to guess that he didn't necessarily get captured the way that we usually think of that word. But the master bard got caught by these kids. Really? That's kind of weird. But then we see eventually, at the end of the book, it's like Arithon's going to go with him at the end of the conflict, where it's like nobody, Arithon and Lysaer are both alive. They kind of both are regrouping, and Lysaer goes off to do his thing. I think he wants to go get more allies and come back and attack Arithon again, I think. And Arithon decides to go with Halaron, and he's finally sort of convinced to go pursue music, and maybe is a bit naive in thinking that he can just go do that. But that's what he cares about. That's what he wants. And he's kind of, like we said, sort of in a lovingly way, a little short-sighted at times. Yeah. So that, when we leave him at the end of this book, it's so exciting to think about what direction is he going to go? Can he be successful with that? Can he just go do what he loves? Can he be safe with Lysaer sort of wanting to continue pursuing him?
And we got him trying to do the other thing. We got him trying to put duty first, and that blew up in his face.
Right.
So it does make sense, and it is kind of cathartic at the end to have him go with Halaron.
And it's like it's another kind of full circle-ish moment, right? That it's early on when he's talking with Arithon's talking with his grandfather at Raven Tower back on Dacinlure when he's getting trained, and he decides to not do the music thing because he's like, I'll be the ruler and I'll do it the right way. And then here it's like he tried it. It didn't work. A bunch of people died and all this, and now it's it kind of felt like that again, where he's going to go be mentored again, but now he's going to do it in the thing that he really cares about. So that was kind of a cool, I guess, circular is not the word I'm looking for, because it's not like he's coming back and doing the same thing again, but it's maybe a flip side of the same
circumspect, like he's seen the full gamut of
there you go,
going along, doing what duty demanded of him, and then he's back around to his initial longing was to pursue the music.
Yeah.
I think you're right about Halaron. There was one of the 3-sentence little things. I forget which chapter it was, but it was like a master bard tearing down these posters where he was like taking apprentices. So I think he knew in some roundabout way that these kids and all this stuff going on with the clan, like I think he wanted Arithon as an apprentice. He saw something there, and you know, we get a little bit in ships. Like there's more to this master bard than, you know, first appears, and what goes into being a master bard. Closing thoughts that I want to touch up on a little bit. So 2 characters that I want to touch up on that I feel like we haven't talked about much is first of all, Alara. A lot of people say that January, you have to stick with it to get good female characters, or, you know, I've heard that said like, oh, she doesn't write, but I thought, you know, as for female characters go, Alara, we get the balancing or the lack of balance, or, you know, kind of the conflict between doing what duty demands of her and following her heart. And I feel like that is, you know, that's something that a lot of women struggle with. You know, she wants to pursue this man that she feels a very strong attraction to, both emotionally, romantically. There's a pool there, and, you know, it's not just she goes against the Koriani and she's with him, and, like, you know, like in a less skilled author that might have been the take, but instead, you know, Alara, you know, it's a thing that she continues to struggle with, is the draw towards what she wants for herself, and then her duty to this greater order. And even though we don't know the Koriani's final goals, we know that it's important to Alara. We also know that, you know, it's mentioned in Curse of the Mistwraith and then later on in later books, but she was born, you know, street rat. Like she came from nothing. She had a similar upbringing to the kids that Arithon was playing with the ship. You know, she came from very humble beginnings, and the Koriani kind of liberated her from that lifestyle. So there is a loyalty there. So we have the duality of duty and individuality, what she wants for herself emotionally and what she must do for her order. And to me, Alara is one of my favorite characters in the whole series. Every time she's on the page, we don't get a lot of her in these first few books, but every time she's on the page, I think that she is just brilliant.
Yeah, I agree. I love that analysis. And I also didn't put this together until just now when you were talking about it, but like that duality of what you want versus what you have to do, if that doesn't sound like what Arithon's dealing with, then
exactly. Yeah. One more I wanted to touch up on is so Dacker. I thought it was so crazy, his aversion to Arithon, just at the very beginning. You know, before they even come through the world gate, he has, like, he keeps talking about like solicit or whatever. You know, he had this bias towards Lysaer's lineage from the jump, you know, and that colors a lot of his interactions with these two brothers. And I thought that Dacker's like prejudices against Arithon and his bias towards liking Lysaer, I thought she did some brilliant stuff examining how Arithon is viewed by others and how he's sort of, I don't know, almost wins people over to his side, and how she's able to use these perspectives that have, you know, so many marks against Arithon already. And you start to see that, you know, even in Curse of the Mistwraith, but especially in later books, you start to see Dakar question his prejudices against Arithon. And Dakar is another one. He may be number one, actually. I don't know. Dakar is like top 3 characters from this series, hands down.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. He's great. And it's funny because when you first start out, he feels like he's the comic relief guy. But like you slowly build into that there's a lot more than that. And wow. Yeah, his development is just fantastic.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Really, really quick, one other mage that I think is important that we haven't talked. Well, I mean, the mages just as a whole are really cool. I love this idea of Sethvir being like the warden, that he sits in the tower, that this tower seems incredibly important. It's like, it feels like it's like imbued with Paravian magic, and it's like this focal point of it there, and he's like watching everything. and he sends the mages out to do stuff. And we obviously have a Sandir that we talked about. Then there's like the two Koriathain and Lysaer that are like ghosts. That it's this happened somehow, and I'm counting also, right? They're like ghosts, and this happened with the conflict with the Mistwraith because they tried to stop it from entering the world. And then Traith, who was like injured really badly, right? He's like kind of crippled in a way, it seems.
He's got his bird.
He's got his little bird homie. Yeah.
Who's the sixth? So we know the seventh one's gone. So we have Sethfir, Asandir, Lysaer, Koriathain, Traith.
The one that's missing, and then this is driving me nuts. The betrayer.
Okay.
They name him in this book for sure, but I can't remember his actual first name. It's something the betrayer.
Right.
That's driving me nuts. Anyway, but yeah, so it's like we get our that cast of people, and just I love every moment that we get with the Fellowship, and the way that she writes the magic happening is like how she came up with this grouping of words to describe this thing is just beyond me. It blows my mind, and it's beautiful. And then I don't even, we could talk about this forever, dude. I don't know. There's so many great characters. There's so many interesting, even like on the Koriani side, we see the Prime that we know almost nothing about, but I'm just like, what is happening with this person? Like, who is this? Why are they doing what they're doing? They have like the first Enchantress that I'm sure she has her own motivations, and they want their Great Waystone back, and they're like, where is it? And we find out it's in the tower that Sethfir's in, and like, why is it there? Did they steal it? Like, what's so there's so clearly there's just so much going on in the story. But it at the same time, you never feel like you're lost. I don't know how that works, but it's like you can follow everything really well, to be honest. Like, we're not going to catch every single thing, obviously. Like, you and I both, we've talked about that a bunch here, but it's amazing how much is going on, but how smooth the ride feels as you go.
That's even in my own videos. Sometimes I get frustrated at people, like when I talk about Malazan and Wars of Light and Shadow, where they're like, this is a series you really like. So many people hype it up as the big brain series that I feel like you're alienating so many readers. Like, you can read Wars of Light and Shadow and pick up on none of the nuances and still have a great ride. You're just going to be boom, like completely shocked when you do a reread and you're like, oh my goodness, all this was here. So I try to pick up on what I can, but I think my biggest thing I tell new readers is don't sweat picking up everything, because you're not going to. I wonder if the people who do think they've picked up on everything really have. I think that there's, so much there, and the second you think you know what's going on is the second you're about to be proved wrong. So
well said. Very well said.
All right. Well, I think that's a wrap on the discussion, and I look forward to speaking to you spoiler free and spoiler filled on Ships of Marior.
Yes, me too.